The words hit me like a freight train at full speed. I've been your husband's lover for 3 years. The therapist's office, once a sanctuary of hope, suddenly felt like a tomb. The air grew thick, suffocating. My vision blurred as the fluorescent lights above seemed to dim into darkness. This woman, this supposed professional who I had trusted with my most intimate secrets, had just shattered my world with the cold precision of a sledgehammer. My name is Patricia Miller. I'm 56 years old, and I've called Tampa, Florida, home for the past 2 decades. The sunshine state that once felt like paradise now felt like purgatory. For 35 years, I believed I had built a life worth living. Richard and I met when I was barely 21, fresh out of college with dreams as big as the Florida sky. He was 25, charming, ambitious, and everything I thought I wanted in a partner. We married 6 months later in a small ceremony that cost us $3,000. Money we scraped together from our minimum wage jobs, believing love would conquer all. Our marriage had weathered many storms. Richard's failed business ventures that cost us $45,000 in savings. My mother's illness that drained another $30,000 from our retirement fund. The miscarriages that left us childless, but somehow brought us closer together. Through it all, I believed we were unbreakable. I was wrong. 6 months ago, I noticed the changes. Richard became distant, distracted. He'd disappear for hours, claiming work emergencies that never quite added up. The man who once couldn't keep his hands off me barely touched me anymore. When I suggested couples therapy, he reluctantly agreed, and that's how we ended up in Dr. Sarah Chen's office every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Dr. Chen was everything I wasn't. Young, beautiful, with an exotic elegance that made me feel frumpy in comparison. She was 32, with sleek black hair and penetrating dark eyes that seemed to see through your soul. Richard always perked up during our sessions, hanging on her every word with an attention he hadn't given me in years. I should have seen the signs, but love makes fools of us all. Today was supposed to be different. Our 35th wedding anniversary was just 3 days away, and I had planned a surprise party for Saturday night. I'd spent $20,500 on catering, decorations, and a venue at the Tampa Bay Hotel. Friends and family were flying in from across the country. I had foolishly believed that therapy was working, that we were rebuilding our connection. But as I sat in that beige office chair, watching Dr. Chen's lips move, forming words that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life, I realized how naive I had been. "Patricia," she continued, her voice steady and clinical, "I know this is devastating, but there's more you need to know. Richard has been planning to leave you for months. He's been transferring money to secret accounts. But that's not the worst part." My hands trembled as I gripped the armrests of the chair. "What could possibly be worse than what you've already told me?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She leaned forward, her eyes filled with what looked like genuine remorse. "Patricia, I'm pregnant. And Richard, he's the father." The room spun. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might burst. 35 years of marriage, 35 years of devotion, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty, all of it crumbling in a matter of minutes. The woman I had trusted with my deepest fears, my most vulnerable moments, had been systematically destroying my life from the inside out. But as the initial shock began to wear off, something unexpected happened. Instead of breaking down completely, I felt a strange sense of clarity washing over me. This betrayal, as devastating as it was, had just shown me who these people really were. And if there's one thing my 56 years on this earth had taught me, it's that the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fires. If you're watching this story unfold, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Because what happens next in my story will show you that sometimes the worst betrayals can lead to the most unexpected victories. Dr. Chen's confession hung in the air like toxic smoke. I stared at her, searching for any sign that this was some kind of sick joke, but her expression remained unnervingly composed. She adjusted her designer glasses, the same ones I'd complimented just weeks ago, and continued speaking as if she were discussing the weather. "Patricia, I know this is overwhelming, but I felt you deserved to know the truth before Saturday's anniversary party." Her words cut through me like ice. She knew about the party. Of course she did. Richard had probably told her everything, probably laughed about my pathetic attempts to save our marriage. "How long have you known about the party?" I managed to ask, my voice hoarse with emotion. Richard told me about it 2 months ago. He's been agonizing over whether to go through with it or reveal the truth beforehand. She spoke about my husband's internal struggle as if she were his confidant, his ally, which I realized with growing horror she was. My mind raced back to all the sessions we'd attended together. Every moment when she'd nodded sympathetically at my concerns, every time she'd suggested I be more understanding of Richard's stress at work, every exercise designed to help us reconnect, it had all been an elaborate charade. She had been playing puppeteer with my emotions while simultaneously destroying my marriage. The pregnancy, I whispered, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. How far along? 12 weeks. She placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. Richard and I have been discussing our future together. We want you to know that we never intended for it to happen this way. Never intended for it to happen this way? As if there was an acceptable way for your therapist to steal your husband and carry his child. The audacity of her statement ignited something fierce within me. So this was all planned? I asked, my voice growing stronger despite the tremor in my hands. The therapy? The affair? The pregnancy? Dr. Chen shifted uncomfortably for the first time since her confession began. Patricia, you have to understand. Richard came to me broken, feeling trapped in a marriage that had lost its spark. He was considering divorce when we started working together privately. Privately? The word hit me like a slap. You've been seeing my husband without me? It's not uncommon for therapists to have individual sessions with clients, she said defensively. But yes, Richard and I have been meeting twice a week for the past year. That's when our connection deepened beyond professional boundaries. A year. While I had been working extra shifts at the medical office where I'd been employed for 15 years, bringing home an additional $800 a week to help with our finances, my husband had been pouring his heart out to another woman. While I had been cooking his favorite meals, doing his laundry, and planning romantic getaways that we couldn't afford, he had been falling in love with our marriage counselor. What about your medical license? I asked, grasping for any weapon I could find. Isn't this highly unethical? Illegal, even? For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear cross her face. Patricia, please understand that Richard and I are in love. We're planning to handle this situation with as much dignity as possible. Richard wants to make sure you're financially secure. How generous of him, I said, sarcasm dripping from every word. And what exactly does financially secure mean in your calculation? Dr. Chen pulled out a manila folder from her desk drawer. Richard has prepared a settlement offer. He's willing to give you the house, which is worth approximately $380,000 plus $150,000 in cash, and he'll continue paying your health insurance for 2 years. I stared at the folder, as if it contained a venomous snake. And what does he get in this generous arrangement? His freedom, she said simply. And the business. The business. Richard's consulting firm that we had built together from nothing. I had worked without pay for the first 3 years, handling all the administrative tasks while he focused on finding clients. I had sacrificed my own career ambitions, taking a lower-paying job with flexible hours so I could support his dreams. The business was now worth over $2 million annually. I helped build that business, I said, my voice rising. I worked for free for 3 years. I gave up my promotion at the hospital to support his career. Richard acknowledges your contributions, Dr. Chen replied coolly. But legally, the business is in his name only. Of course it was. I had been so trusting, so supportive, that I had never insisted on legal protection for my contributions. Another costly mistake in a marriage full of them. As I sat there, absorbing the magnitude of their betrayal, a strange calm began to settle over me. These two people had underestimated me completely. They saw a 56-year-old woman who had devoted her life to her marriage, and they assumed I would crumble under the weight of their deception. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I left Dr. Chen's office in a daze, my legs moving automatically toward my car, while my mind struggled to process the enormity of what had just occurred. The Tampa humidity hit me like a wall as I stepped outside, but I barely noticed. Everything felt surreal, as if I were watching someone else's life fall apart in slow motion. The drive home took forever and no time at all. I found myself sitting in my driveway, staring at the house Richard and I had bought 20 years ago for $180,000. We had lovingly renovated every room, spending countless weekends painting, tiling, and gardening together. Now it felt like a museum of lies, a monument to my own naivety. Richard's car wasn't in the driveway. No surprise there. These days, he rarely came home before 8 p.m., claiming he was working late at the office. Now I knew exactly what kind of work he was doing. I wondered how many of those late nights had been spent planning his exit strategy with his pregnant lover. I walked through the front door and was immediately surrounded by evidence of Saturday's planned celebration. Boxes of decorations sat stacked in the hallway. The caterer's receipt was magneted to the refrigerator, $1,800 for food and service. The bar rental had cost another $400. I had even bought a new dress, a beautiful burgundy number that had cost me $250, money I had saved from skipping lunches at work for 2 months. The guest list was taped to the kitchen counter. 47 people who believed they were coming to celebrate our enduring love. Richard's brother Tom was flying in from Seattle with his wife. My college roommate Sandra had booked a hotel room. Our neighbors, friends from church, colleagues from work, they were all prepared to toast a marriage that was already dead. I sat down at the kitchen table and forced myself to think clearly. In 3 days, all these people would gather to celebrate a lie. But maybe, just maybe, that gathering could serve a different purpose entirely. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." The casualness of his deception was breathtaking. As I stared at the message, another thought occurred to me. If he was planning to leave me anyway, why was he still pretending? Why not just end it now? The answer came to me with crystal clarity. The money. Dr. Chen had mentioned that Richard wanted to handle this with dignity, but I was beginning to understand that their version of dignity meant getting me to agree to their lowball settlement offer before I had time to think or seek legal advice. I spent the evening researching Florida divorce laws on my laptop. What I discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. As Richard's business partner in all but name, I might be entitled to far more than the pittance they were offering. But I would need proof of my contributions, documentation of the financial sacrifices I had made. Fortunately, I was nothing if not organized. Over the years, I had kept meticulous records of our finances, including detailed notes about the early years of the business. I had bank statements showing the $85,000 we had used from our joint savings to fund his first major contract. I had emails from clients thanking me for my assistance in the early days. I had evidence. The next morning, Richard came down to breakfast wearing his favorite blue tie, the one I had given him for Christmas 3 years ago. He kissed my forehead with the same casual affection he had shown for decades, and I marveled at his ability to compartmentalize. "Looking forward to Saturday?" he asked, buttering his toast with steady hands. "Absolutely," I replied, watching his face carefully. "It's going to be unforgettable." If he detected any sarcasm in my voice, he didn't show it. He finished his breakfast, grabbed his briefcase, and headed for the door. "I might be a little late tonight," he said. "Big presentation tomorrow." Another lie, delivered with practiced ease. I wondered if Dr. Chen was helping him prepare his presentation, and the thought made my stomach turn. After he left, I called my sister Margaret in Orlando. Margaret was a successful divorce attorney who had built her practice on helping women who had been betrayed by powerful men. If anyone could help me navigate this nightmare, it was her. "Maggie," I said when she answered, my voice barely steady. "I need your help. Richard is leaving me for our marriage counselor, and they're both trying to rob me blind." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. Then Margaret's voice came through, sharp and focused. "Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and don't let them know you're onto them. Can you get to my office this afternoon?" "Yes," I said, feeling a surge of relief. "Margaret, they think I'm just going to roll over and accept their terms." "Well," my sister said with grim satisfaction, "they clearly don't know the Miller women very well, do they?" As I hung up the phone, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me looked older than her 56 years, but there was something new in her eyes, a steely determination that hadn't been there yesterday. Richard and Dr. Chen had made a critical error in judgment. They had mistaken kindness for weakness, loyalty for stupidity. They were about to learn the difference. Margaret's law office occupied the entire 15th floor of a gleaming downtown Orlando high-rise. As the elevator doors opened, I was greeted by the sight of my sister striding toward me with purposeful determination. At 52, Margaret was 4 years younger than me, but she had always been the fighter in our family. While I had chosen the path of devoted wife and supporter, she had built a legal empire specializing in high-asset divorces. "Patricia," she said, embracing me tightly, "tell me everything, and I mean everything." For the next 2 hours, I poured out the entire story. Margaret took meticulous notes, occasionally interrupting to ask for specific details about finances, timelines, and documentation. When I finished, she leaned back in her leather chair and smiled grimly. "Okay, here's the situation," she began. "Dr. Chen has committed multiple violations of professional ethics and possibly criminal conduct. Having an affair with a client's spouse while treating them as a couple is grounds for losing her license. The pregnancy makes it even worse. It shows a pattern of deception that went on for months." "But what about the business?" I asked. "Can they really just take everything Richard and I built together?" "Not if I have anything to say about it," Margaret replied firmly. "Florida is an equitable distribution state, which means the court will divide marital assets fairly, not necessarily equally. Your contributions to the business, both financial and otherwise, make you entitled to a significant portion of its value." She pulled out a calculator and began running numbers. If the business is generating $2 million annually, its total value could be anywhere from $4 to $8 million, depending on various factors. Even if we estimate conservatively at $5 million, your share could be worth $2.5 million or more. The number took my breath away. "They offered me $150,000 in cash plus the house. They offered you roughly 10% of what you're actually entitled to," Margaret said, her voice cold with fury. "But here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow is Friday. Saturday is your anniversary party. You're going to attend that party, and you're going to let them think everything is proceeding according to their plan." "Margaret, I can't pretend to celebrate my marriage while knowing what I know." "Yes, you can, and you will," she said firmly. "Because while they think they're in control, we're going to be gathering evidence and building our case. I'm assigning my best investigator to this case immediately." She picked up her phone and dialed an extension. "James, I need you in my office now." Within minutes, a tall man with graying temples and intelligent eyes knocked on the door. "Patricia, meet James Morrison. He's a former FBI agent who specializes in financial investigations. James, Mrs. Miller's husband, has been hiding assets and planning to abandon their 35-year marriage for his therapist." James listened intently as Margaret briefed him on the situation. "I'll need access to all financial records, business documents, and correspondence," he said. "We'll want to trace every penny that's been moved in the past year." "How long will this take?" I asked. "For a preliminary investigation? 3 weeks? For a complete forensic accounting? 2 to 3 months. But Mrs. Miller, I have to warn you, this is going to get expensive. My fee is $300 per hour." I thought about the $2,500 I had already spent on Saturday's party, money that now felt like a cruel joke. "Do it," I said. "Whatever it costs." Margaret smiled approvingly. "There's one more thing we need to discuss. Richard and Dr. Chen clearly think they hold all the cards, but they've made a crucial mistake. By continuing the therapy sessions while conducting their affair, she's created a paper trail of unethical behavior. We're going to file a complaint with the Florida Board of Psychology. Will that help our case? It will destroy her career and credibility," Margaret said with satisfaction. "A therapist who has lost her license for sleeping with clients won't make a very sympathetic witness if this goes to trial." As we wrapped up the meeting, Margaret handed me a thick folder. "This contains everything you need to know about protecting yourself during the divorce process. Don't let Richard know you've hired an attorney yet. Let him think you're still reeling from the shock." On the drive back to Tampa, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. For the first time since Dr. Chen's devastating revelation, I wasn't just reacting to their betrayal, I was taking action. That evening, Richard came home at his usual time, carrying Chinese takeout from our favorite restaurant. "Thought we could have a quiet dinner before the craziness of tomorrow night," he said, unpacking the containers. I watched him serve the food, marveling at his ability to maintain this facade. "Richard," I said carefully, "are you happy about the party?" He paused for just a moment, so briefly I might have missed it if I wasn't watching closely. "Of course. It's wonderful that you put so much effort into celebrating us." "Us," I repeated. "After all these years, do you think we still have what it takes to make it another 35 years? This time, the pause was longer. "Patricia, marriage is work, but yes, I think we can make it work." Another lie, delivered with the same practiced ease. As I ate my sweet and sour chicken, I wondered if Richard had any idea that his carefully constructed plan was about to implode. Tomorrow night's party would indeed be unforgettable, just not in the way he expected. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. James found something interesting in the public records. Call me after 9 p.m. I excused myself to the bathroom and called her immediately. Patricia, Margaret's voice was tight with excitement. Richard filed paperwork to incorporate a new business entity 3 months ago. It's called RCM Consulting. Richard Chen Miller. He's been planning this for a lot longer than they admitted. The audacity of it took my breath away. He had literally included Dr. Chen's name in their new business venture while still married to me. But instead of feeling devastated, I felt energized. They had just handed me even more ammunition for the battle ahead. Saturday evening arrived with typical Florida drama. A spectacular sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed to mock the darkness of my situation. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the burgundy dress I had bought with such hope just weeks ago. The woman looking back at me appeared calm, even elegant, but my hands shook slightly as I applied my lipstick. Richard emerged from his walk-in closet wearing the navy suit I had bought him for his 55th birthday last year. He looked handsome, distinguished, and utterly dishonest. For a moment, I was struck by the surreal nature of what we were about to do, play the role of loving spouses while our marriage lay in ruins between us. "You look beautiful," he said, and for just an instant, I saw a flicker of genuine sadness in his eyes. Whether he was mourning what we had lost or simply feeling guilty about what he was about to do, I couldn't tell. "Thank you," I replied evenly. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," he said, straightening his tie. The Tampa Bay Hotel's ballroom was transformed into an elegant celebration of our supposed enduring love. Golden lights twinkled overhead, and the tables were adorned with centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath, flowers that had been in my bridal bouquet 35 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. Guests began arriving at 7 p.m. sharp. Richard's brother Tom was among the first, embracing us both warmly and commenting on how lucky we were to have found lasting love in an age of broken marriages. If only he knew how broken ours truly was. My college roommate Sandra approached with tears in her eyes. "Patricia, you and Richard are such an inspiration. 35 years of marriage, and you still look at each other like newlyweds." I managed to smile. "We've certainly been through a lot together." As the evening progressed, I watched Richard work the room with the same charm that had captivated me decades ago. He told stories about our early years, laughed at old jokes, and played the role of devoted husband with Academy Award-worthy skill. Several times I caught him checking his phone discreetly, no doubt exchanging messages with his pregnant lover. The most painful moment came when our neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez pulled me aside. "Patricia, dear, you must tell me your secret. After 35 years, what keeps a marriage strong?" I looked across the room at Richard, who was deep in conversation with his business partner. "Trust," I said without hesitation. "Complete and absolute trust in each other." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "That's beautiful, dear. Richard is such a lucky man." As the evening wore on, I found myself studying the faces of our guests, people who genuinely cared about us, who had traveled hundreds of miles to celebrate what they believed was a love story worth honoring. They had no idea they were witnessing an elaborate lie. The champagne toast came at 9 p.m. Richard stood up, tapping his glass with a silver spoon to get everyone's attention. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and confident. 35 years ago, I married the most incredible woman I've ever known. Patricia has been my partner, my best friend, and my anchor through every storm life has thrown our way." The crowd murmured appreciatively. I forced myself to smile and nod, playing my part in this final performance. "She sacrificed her own dreams to support mine," Richard continued, and I noticed his voice wavering slightly. "She worked tirelessly to help me build our business, never asking for recognition or reward. She has been the foundation of everything good in my life." The irony of his words was staggering. Here he was, publicly acknowledging my contributions to his success, while privately planning to deny me any real compensation for those sacrifices. "So please," he said, raising his glass, "join me in toasting the most loyal, devoted, and selfless woman I know. To Patricia, may the next 35 years be even more wonderful than the first. To Patricia, the crowd responded enthusiastically, glasses clinking throughout the room. I stood up, accepting the applause with grace, even as my heart broke a little more. These people truly loved us, believed in us, and had invested their time and emotions in celebrating our marriage. Richard's betrayal wasn't just destroying me, it was making fools of everyone who cared about us. As the evening wound down and guests began saying their goodbyes, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Richard was talking quietly with his business partner, Mike, near the bar. The transition should be smooth, Richard was saying. Patricia won't be involved in day-to-day operations anymore. We're restructuring. Mike looked confused. But Patricia handles all the client communications. She knows those accounts better than anyone. Changes are coming, Richard replied vaguely. I'll fill you in on Monday. Even Mike, Richard's closest business associate, had no idea what was coming. Richard was planning to pull the rug out from under everyone, not just me, but the employees and partners who had built their careers around our company. The last guest left at 11:30 p.m. Richard and I stood in the empty ballroom, surrounded by the remnants of our fake celebration. The catering staff was cleaning up around us, boxing leftover food and stacking chairs. That went well, Richard said, loosening his tie. Yes, I agreed. Everyone seemed to have a wonderful time celebrating our marriage. He looked at me sharply, as if trying to detect sarcasm in my voice, but I kept my expression neutral. On the drive home, we sat in comfortable silence, or what he perceived as comfortable. In reality, I was calculating my next moves, planning my strategy, and mentally preparing for the war that was about to begin. As we pulled into our driveway, Richard's phone buzzed with a text message. I caught a glimpse of the sender's name on the screen. Sarah, Dr. Chen, was checking in on her accomplice, probably eager to know how the evening had gone. In a few hours, she would learn that tonight's performance had been far more successful than she could have imagined, just not in the way she expected. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new strategies, and the beginning of the end for their carefully orchestrated plan. Sunday morning brought an unexpected sense of calm. Richard slept late, no doubt exhausted from the emotional toll of maintaining his facade for an entire evening. I made coffee and sat on our back patio, watching the morning sun filter through the palm trees that Richard and I had planted together 15 years ago. Everything looked the same, but nothing would ever be the same again. My phone buzzed at 9 a.m. with a call from James Morrison, Margaret's investigator. Mrs. Miller, I hope I'm not calling too early. I've been working through the weekend, and I have some findings that can't wait. Go ahead, I said, moving to a corner of the yard where I couldn't be overheard. Your husband has been very busy, James began. In the past 6 months, he's moved $340,000 from your joint business accounts into personal accounts that only bear his name. He's also taken out a $200,000 business loan using company assets as collateral, money that appears to have disappeared into those same personal accounts. The numbers hit me like physical blows. That's over $500,000. That's just what I've found so far, James continued. There's more. He's purchased a condominium in Clearwater Beach under the name of that new business entity, RCM Consulting. The purchase price was $480,000, and it was bought with cash. I gripped the phone tighter. He bought a love nest with our money. It appears so. But here's the interesting part. The condo is in both his name and Dr. Chen's. She's listed as a 50% owner despite having no apparent source of income beyond her therapy practice. My mind raced. So, they've been planning this for months, maybe longer. Mrs. Miller, based on what I'm seeing, they've been planning this for at least a year, but they made some critical mistakes. Dr. Chen filed a change of address form with the Postal Service 6 weeks ago, redirecting her mail to the Clearwater condo. Yet according to the Florida Board of Psychology, her practice is still listed at her downtown Tampa office. What does that mean? It means she's been living there already, while still treating patients, including you and your husband, at her professional address. That's another ethics violation we can add to the list. As James continued his briefing, I saw Richard emerge onto the patio in his bathrobe, coffee cup in hand. I quickly ended the call and turned to greet him with a smile. Good morning, I said cheerfully. How are you feeling after last night? Tired, he admitted, settling into the chair beside me. But it was a beautiful evening. Thank you for organizing everything. My pleasure, I replied. It meant a lot to see how much people care about us. Richard nodded, staring out at the yard we had landscaped together. For a moment, he looked genuinely melancholy, and I wondered if he was having second thoughts about his plan. "Patricia," he said slowly, "I've been thinking about our future." My pulse quickened. "Oh? We're not getting any younger. Maybe it's time we talked about what we want the next phase of our lives to look like." Here it comes, I thought, the setup for his grand revelation. "What did you have in mind?" I asked innocently. "Well, the business is doing well. Maybe I should consider stepping back a bit, letting others handle more of the day-to-day operations. We could travel more, enjoy our retirement." It was masterful, really. He was laying the groundwork for his exit strategy while making it sound like it was for our mutual benefit. "That sounds wonderful," I said. "But wouldn't stepping back from the business affect our income?" "We'd be fine financially," he assured me. "I've been making some investments, setting aside money for our future." Investments like a secret condo and a new business partnership with his pregnant mistress, I thought bitterly. "Richard, that's so thoughtful of you to plan ahead like that. Can you show me what you've set up? I'd love to understand our financial picture better." For the first time, he looked uncomfortable. "Oh, it's all pretty technical stuff, boring financial documents. I don't want to overwhelm you with the details." "I wouldn't mind," I pressed gently. "After all, it's our future together." "Of course," he said quickly. "I'll put together a summary for you soon." Another lie. At this point, I was keeping a mental tally. The rest of Sunday passed quietly. Richard spent most of the day in his home office, supposedly catching up on work, but more likely coordinating with Dr. Chen about their next moves. I used the time to scan and organize all of our financial documents, creating digital copies of everything James might need for his investigation. That evening, as we watched a movie together on the couch, my phone vibrated with a text from Margaret. "Emergency meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. James found something big." I excused myself to the bathroom and quickly responded, "We'll be there." When I returned to the living room, Richard was staring at his own phone with a frown. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just work stuff," he said, quickly putting the phone away. "Nothing important," but I had caught a glimpse of the message on his screen. "She's getting suspicious. We need to move faster." The sender was listed simply as S, undoubtedly Dr. Chen. They were accelerating their timeline, which meant I needed to accelerate mine as well. Monday morning, I told Richard I was going shopping in Orlando with Margaret, a half-truth that came easily after watching him lie so effortlessly for months. Margaret's office was buzzing with activity when I arrived. James was there, along with another man I didn't recognize. "Patricia, meet David Kellerman," Margaret said. "He's a forensic accountant who specializes in hidden assets. Show her what you found, David." David spread a series of documents across the conference table. "Mrs. Miller, your husband has been operating a sophisticated scheme to hide marital assets. In addition to the $540,000 James already mentioned, we've discovered another $280,000 in cryptocurrency accounts and offshore banking." My head spun. "How much are we talking about in total?" "So far? Just over $820,000 that should have remained in marital accounts," David replied. "But there's more. He's been underreporting the business income for months, showing artificial losses that don't match the actual cash flow." Margaret leaned forward. "Patricia, we estimate that Richard has stolen over $1 million from your marital estate in preparation for this divorce." "Stolen," I repeated numbly. "That's exactly what this is," Margaret confirmed. "And the beautiful thing is, he's documented every transaction. He thought he was being clever, but he's actually created a paper trail that will destroy him in court. What do we do now?" "Now," Margaret said with grim satisfaction, "we go to war." The war room that Margaret created in her conference room looked like something out of a legal thriller. Charts, timelines, and financial documents covered every available surface. Phone records, bank statements, and email printouts were organized into neat stacks that told the story of a marriage's systematic destruction. "The beautiful thing about criminals," Margaret said as she paced in front of the evidence wall, "is that they always think they're smarter than everyone else. Richard and Dr. Chen have left us a treasure trove of evidence." James Morrison stood beside a timeline he had created on the whiteboard. "Look at this pattern," he said, pointing to a series of red marks. "Every major financial transaction coincides with a private therapy session between Richard and Dr. Chen. They were literally planning the theft of your assets during what you thought were marriage counseling sessions." "It's psychological torture," I said, feeling sick. "They were destroying our marriage while pretending to save it." And billing your insurance for the privilege, David Kellerman added grimly. Dr. Chen submitted claims for couples therapy sessions that were actually planning meetings for their affair and your financial ruin. Margaret stopped pacing and turned to face me. Patricia, we have enough evidence to not only win this divorce case decisively, but also to file criminal charges for theft, fraud, and insurance fraud. But I need to ask you something important. How far are you willing to go? What do you mean? I mean, we can settle this quietly and get you everything you're entitled to, plus damages. Or we can make this public, destroy their reputations, and ensure they face real consequences for what they've done to you. I thought about all the lies, all the manipulation, all the nights I had lain awake wondering what was wrong with me, with our marriage. I thought about the guests at Saturday's party, celebrating a love story that was actually a cruel deception. I want justice, I said firmly. Real justice. Margaret smiled. Then let's give it to them. The first phase of our counterattack began immediately. Margaret filed a motion for an emergency injunction to freeze all of Richard's assets, including the business accounts he had been raiding. She also filed a formal complaint with the Florida Board of Psychology against Dr. Chen. The beauty of this approach, Margaret explained, is that they won't see it coming until it's too late to react effectively. While the legal machinery began to move, I had to return home and continue the charade for a few more days. The hardest part was watching Richard go about his daily routine, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. Tuesday evening, he came home with flowers, a bouquet of yellow roses that probably cost $40. What's the occasion? I asked, accepting them with a smile. Do I need an occasion to buy flowers for my wife? He replied, kissing my cheek. The gesture might have been sweet if I didn't know he was planning to abandon me within days. Instead, it felt like a mockery of every genuine romantic gesture he had ever made. Richard, I said carefully, you mentioned wanting to show me our financial planning documents. When would be a good time for that? His smile faltered slightly. Oh, right. I'm still pulling everything together. Maybe this weekend? Of course, I said. No rush, but there was a rush. Margaret had warned me that once the legal proceedings began, Richard would likely become defensive and potentially dangerous. Not physically dangerous. Richard had never raised a hand to me, but dangerous in terms of what he might do to hide or destroy evidence. Wednesday morning brought the call I had been waiting for. Margaret's voice was tight with excitement. Patricia, the judge approved our emergency motion. As of noon today, all of Richard's accounts are frozen. He won't be able to access so much as a checking account without court approval. What happens when he finds out? He's about to, Margaret said. The sheriff is serving him with papers right now. I looked at the clock. 11:47 a.m. Richard was at his office, probably planning his next move with Dr. Chen. In just a few minutes, his carefully constructed plan would begin to unravel. My phone rang at 12:15 p.m. Richard's name appeared on the screen, and I let it ring twice before answering. Patricia! His voice was frantic, panicked. Something's wrong. The bank says all our accounts are frozen. There are legal papers. I don't understand what's happening. What kind of legal papers? I asked innocently. Something about asset preservation and emergency motions. Patricia, do you know anything about this? The moment of truth had arrived. I could continue the charade a little longer, or I could end it right now. Yes, Richard, I said calmly. I know exactly what's happening. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 10 seconds. Patricia, we need to talk. I'm coming home right now. I'll be here, I said. After I hung up, I called Margaret. He knows. He's on his way home. Are you safe? Do you want me to send someone over? I'm fine, I said. Richard isn't violent. But Margaret, I want you to know, I'm ready for whatever comes next. You're going to be amazing, my sister said. Remember, you hold all the cards now. Don't let him manipulate you. I spent the 20 minutes before Richard's arrival arranging the yellow roses he had brought me the night before. They were beautiful flowers, probably chosen with care, and they deserved better than to be caught up in this mess. Like our guests at Saturday's party, like our friends and family, like our employees, innocent victims of Richard's selfishness. When I heard his key in the front door, I was sitting calmly at the kitchen table, hands folded, ready to face whatever came next. The man who walked through that door was not the composed, confident Richard I had lived with for 35 years. This Richard looked haggard, desperate, and completely unprepared for the reality that his wife was not the naive, trusting woman he thought he could easily manipulate. "Patricia," he said, his voice shaking, "what have you done?" Richard stood in our kitchen doorway looking like a man who had seen a ghost. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie was askew, and there were sweat stains on his shirt despite the air conditioning. For the first time in months, I was seeing the real Richard, not the smooth, manipulative version he had been presenting to me. "What have I done?" I repeated his question calmly. "I've protected myself, Richard. Something I should have done a long time ago." He moved toward the table where I sat, then seemed to think better of it and remained standing. "Patricia, there's been some kind of mistake. These legal papers, the frozen accounts, we can fix this. We need to call our lawyer." "Our lawyer?" I laughed, surprising myself with how bitter it sounded. "Richard, we haven't been we for a long time. You made sure of that." His face went through a series of expressions, confusion, fear, and finally a calculating look that I recognized all too well. This was the face he wore during difficult business negotiations, when he was trying to figure out how much the other party knew. "I don't know what you think you know," he said carefully, "but you're making a terrible mistake." "Am I?" I stood up slowly, maintaining eye contact. "So you're not having an affair with Dr. Chen? You haven't been stealing money from our business? You didn't buy a condo in Clearwater Beach with our marital assets?" With each revelation, Richard's face grew paler. By the time I mentioned the condo, he had sunk into a chair across from me. "How did you—" he started, then stopped himself. "How did I find out?" I finished for him. "Richard, you underestimated me. You thought because I loved you, because I trusted you, that I was stupid. But love and stupidity are not the same thing." He buried his face in his hands. "Patricia, please, let me explain." "Oh, I'd love to hear your explanation," I said, sitting back down. "Please, explain to me how sleeping with our marriage counselor was supposed to help our relationship. Explain how stealing over $1 million from our marital assets was for our benefit. Explain how planning to abandon our 35-year marriage was an act of love. You know about the money?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I know about all of it, Richard. The cryptocurrency accounts, the offshore banking, the new business entity with Chen's name on it. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" For a long moment, we sat in silence. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, marking the seconds of our marriage's final moments. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," Richard finally said. "How was it supposed to happen?" I asked. "Were you planning to just disappear one day? Leave me a note? Or were you going to sit me down and explain that you'd found true love while robbing me blind?" "Sarah and I," he began, then stopped when he saw my expression. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't you dare try to romanticize this betrayal. You want to talk about Sarah? Let's talk about how she violated every ethical standard in her profession. Let's talk about how she billed our insurance company for sessions where she was planning to destroy our marriage. Let's talk about how she's going to lose her license and possibly face criminal charges." Richard's head snapped up. "Criminal charges?" "Insurance fraud, Richard. Theft by deception. Professional misconduct. Your girlfriend is going to prison." "Patricia, please." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "We can work this out. I'll cancel the divorce proceedings. We can go to a different therapist. We can start over." "What divorce proceedings?" I asked quietly. The color drained from his face completely. I meant, you haven't filed for divorce yet, have you?" I continued. "You were going to wait until after you'd moved all the money, weren't you? Make sure I couldn't claim any of it?" Richard's silence was confirmation enough. "Well, here's some news for you," I said, standing up to face him. "I filed for divorce this morning. I'm also filing criminal charges for theft and fraud. And I'm seeking full ownership of the business you built with my labor and my money." "You can't do this," he said desperately. "The business is in my name. You don't have any legal claim to it." I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up a manila folder that Margaret had prepared for me. "Actually, I do. See, while you were busy stealing from our accounts, I was busy documenting my contributions to the business. Every unpaid hour I worked, every client I managed, every sacrifice I made for your career. I have emails, bank records, testimony from clients who remember my work. I have evidence of every penny we invested from our joint savings." I opened the folder and pulled out a document. This is a forensic accounting report that shows the true value of the business, $6.2 million, not the $2 million you've been claiming. And this, I pulled out another document, is a legal analysis showing that I'm entitled to at least 60% of that value based on my contributions. Richard sank back into his chair. Patricia, be reasonable. We can split everything fairly. You don't need to destroy me. Destroy you? I laughed again. Richard, you destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure you face the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. That's my attorney, I said. The Florida Board of Psychology has suspended Dr. Chen's license pending investigation. She's also being evicted from her office building for violating the terms of her lease. Sarah's pregnant, Richard said quietly. She needs her income. She should have thought about that before she decided to sleep with her patient's husband, I replied coldly. Actions have consequences, Richard. Something you're about to learn very thoroughly. He looked up at me with an expression I had never seen before. Complete and utter defeat. What do you want? He asked. Justice, I said simply. I want every penny you stole returned with interest. I want my fair share of the business. I want this house. And I want you and your pregnant girlfriend to face the full legal consequences of what you've done. And if I agree to all that, then maybe, just maybe, I'll consider not pursuing the criminal charges, I said. But Richard, understand this. I will never forgive you. Our marriage is over. The life we built together is finished. You chose to throw it all away for a woman who cared so little about professional ethics that she destroyed her own career for you. Richard stood up slowly, looking older than his 58 years. I need to call Sarah. She needs to know what's happening. I'm sure she does, I said. But Richard, don't even think about trying to hide any more assets or influence any witnesses. I have investigators watching every move you make. He nodded numbly and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back to me. Patricia, for what it's worth, I never meant for it to hurt you this much. That's the problem, Richard, I replied. You never thought about how much it would hurt me at all. 3 weeks later, I sat in Margaret's office, reviewing the settlement proposal that Richard's attorney had delivered that morning. The transformation in the numbers was remarkable and devastating for Richard. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, I said, scanning the document. He's agreeing to give me full ownership of the business, the house, $2. $1 million in cash, plus all assets he moved to hidden accounts, plus damages, Margaret added with satisfaction. Plus he's paying all legal fees and court costs. Plus he's forfeiting any claim to your retirement accounts or pension. What about Dr. Chen? She's in even worse shape, Margaret said, pulling out another folder. The Florida Board of Psychology revoked her license permanently. She can never practice therapy again in any state. The insurance fraud charges are moving forward, and the district attorney expects to file additional charges related to the asset hiding scheme. I felt a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction, sadness, and something approaching pity. What about the baby? That's Richard's problem now, Margaret said firmly. Patricia, you can't save everyone from the consequences of their choices. Chen knew exactly what she was doing when she decided to destroy your marriage. David Kellerman knocked on the conference room door and entered with a broad smile. Ladies, I have the final numbers from the forensic accounting. The total value of marital assets that Richard attempted to hide comes to $1.147 million. With damages and penalties, he owes you just over $2.3 million. The number was staggering. How is he going to pay that? He's liquidating everything, David replied. The Clearwater Beach condo is going on the market. He's borrowing against his personal assets. He's even selling his vintage car collection. I thought about the 1967 Mustang convertible that Richard had restored over 3 years in our garage. He had lovingly worked on that car every weekend, and it had been his pride and joy. Now it would be sold to pay for his betrayal. There's one more thing, Margaret said, pulling out a newspaper clipping. The Tampa Bay Business Journal is running a story about the case. It's not naming names, but anyone in your professional circle will know exactly who they're talking about. I read the headline, Local Business Owner Faces Fraud, Charges After Affair with Marriage Counselor. The article detailed how a prominent Tampa businessman had been caught stealing marital assets while conducting an affair with his wife's therapist. It mentioned the ethics violations, the criminal charges, and the substantial settlement awarded to the wronged spouse. His reputation in the business community is finished, Margaret said. No one will trust him with their money or their secrets after this. What about our employees? I asked. The business employed 12 people. That's something you'll need to decide, Margaret replied. As the new owner, you can choose to keep the business running, sell it, or close it down. I had been thinking about this for days. I want to keep it running, but I want to change everything about how it operates. More transparency, better profit sharing for employees, and a completely new management structure. You're going to run it yourself? Why not? I said, surprising myself with my confidence. I helped build it from nothing. I know every client, every process, every system. And I'm only 56. I have at least 10 good working years left in me. That evening, I returned to the house that was now legally mine. Richard had moved out the previous week, taking only his personal belongings and leaving behind 35 years of shared memories. The space felt different now, quieter, but also more peaceful. I was in the kitchen making dinner when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman I didn't recognize. She was clearly pregnant, probably about 6 months along, and she looked nervous. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Miller, I'm Sarah Chen." For a moment, I was too stunned to speak. The woman who had destroyed my marriage was standing on my doorstep, looking fragile and desperate. "What do you want?" I asked. "I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know that I'm sorry." "You're sorry?" I repeated. "You systematically destroyed my marriage while billing my insurance company for the privilege, and you're sorry?" Tears were streaming down her face now. "I know I can't undo what I did. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be forgiven, but I wanted you to know that I never intended for it to go this far." "How far did you intend for it to go?" I asked. "Did you plan to just have a brief affair, and then what? Continue treating us as a couple? Watch our marriage slowly die while pretending to help?" "I don't know," she sobbed. "I wasn't thinking clearly. I was lonely, and Richard was charming, and before I knew it, we were in too deep to stop." "And the money? The secret accounts? The business entity with your name on it? Was that also just poor judgment?" She looked genuinely confused. "What business entity? What secret accounts?" I studied her face carefully. Either she was an exceptional actress, or Richard had been lying to her as well. "Dr. Chen," I said slowly, "what exactly did Richard tell you about his financial situation?" "He said you were going through a difficult time financially, that the business was struggling, and that's why he was stressed about the marriage," she replied. "He said he wanted to make sure you were taken care of, even if the marriage ended." The pieces clicked into place. Richard had been manipulating her just as much as he had been manipulating me. He had portrayed himself as a devoted husband trying to save a struggling marriage while secretly planning to abandon both of us. "Dr. Chen," I said, "Richard stole nearly $2 million from our marital assets. He bought you a condo with stolen money. He created a business entity with your name on it without your knowledge or consent. You weren't his partner in this scheme. You were another victim." The look of horror on her face told me everything I needed to know. "That can't be true," she whispered. "It's all documented," I said. "He's being forced to liquidate everything to pay restitution. That includes the condo you've been living in." She sank onto my front steps, sobbing uncontrollably. Despite everything she had done to me, I felt a stab of pity for this broken woman, carrying the child of a man who had used her as thoroughly as he had used me. "Dr. Chen," I said gently, "you need to get your own attorney. You need to protect yourself and your baby from whatever other schemes Richard might have involved you in." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Why are you telling me this? Why are you helping me?" "Because we were both victims of the same man," I said. "The difference is, I fought back." 6 months later, I stood in the newly renovated offices of Patricia Miller Consulting Services, watching my team of 12 employees collaborate on our biggest project yet. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the modern workspace that had replaced Richard's old-fashioned hierarchical office layout. The transformation had been remarkable. Once I took full control of the business, I discovered that our revenue had been even higher than the forensic accountants had calculated. Richard's creative bookkeeping had hidden not just stolen money, but also legitimate profits that he had been afraid to report. The company was actually worth closer to $8 million, not the $6.2 million we had initially estimated. "Mrs. Miller," called Jessica, our new operations manager, "the Henderson Group just signed the contract. That's a $400,000 project over the next 18 months. I smiled, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment that I hadn't experienced in years. Excellent work, Jessica. Make sure everyone on the team knows they'll be sharing in the success bonus. This was the new model I had implemented: radical transparency in finances, profit sharing for all employees, and a collaborative leadership structure that valued everyone's contributions. The employees who had once worked in fear of Richard's moods and arbitrary decisions now thrived in an environment where their efforts were recognized and rewarded. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Verdict is in. Call me." I stepped into my private office and dialed her number immediately. "Patricia," Margaret's voice was triumphant. "Richard just pled guilty to all charges. He's been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for fraud and tax evasion." I sank into my chair, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. "And Dr. Chen?" 6 months in minimum security, followed by 3 years of probation and community service. She'll also never be allowed to practice psychology again, anywhere in the United States. The justice felt both complete and hollow. These consequences wouldn't undo the damage that had been done, but they would serve as a warning to others who might consider similar betrayals. "There's more," Margaret continued. "The restitution payments have been finalized. Between the asset recovery and the damages, you're receiving a total of $3.2 million in compensation." The number still took my breath away. Combined with the business value in the house, I was now worth more than $11 million. More than Richard and I had ever been worth together, even in our best years. "Margaret," I said, "I want to establish a foundation." "What kind of foundation?" "Something to help women who've been financially abused by their spouses. Legal aid, counseling services, financial education. Too many women stay in bad marriages because they're afraid they can't survive financially on their own." "That's a beautiful idea," Margaret said warmly. "And Patricia, it's exactly the kind of thing that will give all this pain some meaning." After we hung up, I walked out to the main office and looked around at the bustling activity. Mike Torres, Richard's former business partner, had become my chief operating officer. He had been horrified to learn about Richard's deception and had testified on my behalf during the legal proceedings. "Mike," I called, "can I see you for a moment?" He joined me in my office, carrying a thick folder of project proposals. "I just heard about Richard's sentencing," he said. "How are you feeling about it?" "Relieved," I said honestly. "Mike, I want to talk to you about expanding the business. I'm thinking about opening a second office, maybe in Miami or Jacksonville." His eyes lit up. "That's a fantastic idea. We've been getting inquiries from potential clients in South Florida. I also want to talk about making you a partner," I continued. "You've been loyal to this company through everything, and you deserve to share in its success." Mike's jaw dropped. "Patricia, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," I laughed. "I'm learning that life is too short to work with people you don't trust completely." That evening, I returned to my house now, legally and emotionally. I had redecorated extensively, removing all traces of the life I had shared with Richard, and creating a space that reflected my own tastes and personality. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman holding a baby carrier. It took me a moment to recognize Sarah Chen. She looked healthier than when I had last seen her, and there was a strength in her posture that hadn't been there before. I opened the door cautiously. "Dr. Chen, please," she said, "call me Sarah. I wanted to show you someone." She turned the baby carrier toward me, revealing a beautiful infant with dark hair and Richard's unmistakable blue eyes. "This is Emma," Sarah said softly. "She's 3 months old." I looked at the baby, my ex-husband's daughter, and felt an unexpected wave of emotion. This innocent child would grow up knowing that her father was a convicted criminal, that her conception had destroyed multiple lives. "She's beautiful," I said sincerely. "Patricia, I wanted to thank you," Sarah continued. "When you told me to get my own attorney, it saved my life. I discovered that Richard had been lying to me about everything, not just the money, but about you, about your marriage, about his intentions. My lawyer helped me get a settlement that will support Emma and me." "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. "I also wanted you to know that I'm testifying at the congressional hearing about ethics in therapeutic practice. I want to make sure that what I did can never happen again." I looked at this young woman who had once been my destroyer and was now trying to rebuild her life and protect others. "That takes courage," I said. "I learned about courage from watching you," she replied. You could have just taken a settlement and stayed quiet. Instead, you fought for justice, not just for yourself, but for everyone. As I watched Sarah walk away with her baby, I reflected on how completely my life had changed. A year ago, I had been a financially dependent wife, trusting and naive, believing that love and loyalty were enough to sustain a marriage. Today, I was a successful business owner, an advocate for women's rights, and a woman who had learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept betrayal. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed Margaret's number. "Patricia," she said excitedly, "I just got a call from a reporter at 60 Minutes. They want to do a segment about your case and the foundation you're starting. Are you interested?" I looked around my beautiful home, thought about my thriving business, and the foundation that would help other women find their strength. A year ago, the idea of being on national television would have terrified me. Today, it felt like an opportunity to turn my pain into purpose. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'm very interested." As I ended the call, I realized that my story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Richard and Dr. Chen had tried to destroy my life, but instead, they had liberated me to become the woman I was always meant to be. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most unexpected victories. Sometimes losing everything is the first step toward gaining more than you ever dreamed possible. To everyone watching this story, remember that you are stronger than you think, braver than you feel, and deserving of so much more than those who try to diminish you. If my story has moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Your support means everything, and who knows, your story of triumph might be the next one we share. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Remember, every ending is also a beginning.